one of the constant things we have followed since Brexit was what is going on with British small businesses or medium businesses here in the UK. And for those of you who don't know, we have a term. I'm pretty sure it's universal. Um, I'm sure people will tell me in the comments if it's not, but we have a sort of a catch-all term for these businesses, and they're called SMEs, medium to small enterprises. And this can be any company that has between 10 to sometimes it's 500, sometimes it can be 2. It gets a bit loose sometimes about where and who it can be applied to. But, as I've said before, SMEs make up the vast majority of businesses operating and even probably employers in your local town. Uh, a lot of people really don't realize it, but they do. And I've said this before, 80% of all business-based infrastructure is based on and around SMEs, small, medium enterprises. So it is a hugely important facet and factor of our economy that these SMEs are there and that they, survive and thrive. A lot of people often focus on like the really big companies, and yep, that's fine. But then you forget about the rest, the rest of these, companies that are out there. And I've said before, I think the left sometimes really does need to be a lot more business focused. Like, what do we as the left have to say to SMEs, and how can we make better environments so that these types of current companies can survive and thrive and go on to do bigger and better things? I don't think that is not too much of an anti-lefty thing to say. I'm still very much for workers' rights. Still very much for unions. They are not, I think in positions that is sort of too difficult to reconcile. I just think we have to look at businesses and what they do, and at the end of it, what they can sort of provide to everyone else that's out there in the country. And as we've said, 80% of the UK business infrastructure based in and around SMEs. So pretty important what happens to SMEs. And of course, as we always said, SMEs do not tend to have the big infrastructure already in place for exporting. They were always going to be one of the biggest losers when it has come to Brexit, and we've seen that over the past few years. We have covered a lot of businesses that are having huge problems because of Brexit, or that have stopped trading with Europe because of Brexit, and has resulted in a massive loss, of business for Brexit. And it tends to be around about 25 to 30%. So that is a lot for a SME to suddenly lose. If you lose 30% of your business, that's a lot of, you've got to think what that would translate into. And for a lot of companies, that can be a massive hit to try and absorb. But today we are going to cover another such business, covering this because, again, it's unfortunate that this is happening, but this is to a very old company, actually a 6th generation company. That's how much this company has been handed down through the years to get that far. So that in itself is quite an achievement, to see such a company sort of be passed down through that, to be in its 6th generation of this. And this is Wiremakers here in the UK, and they are, of course, blaming, as we'll see in a moment, blaming Brexit for absolutely shredding its business. But before we do get on into this, please remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below too. So let's crack on then into this. So this comes from The Guardian. 6th generation winemaker blames Brexit for shredding its business. So The head of a family-owned company that has made specialist wires and cables for over 6 generations for clients ranging from naval vessels to film set has now blamed Brexit for shredding his business. Mark Ormondson, the owner of Ormondson Wire, said that the small businesses such as his had been flushed down the toilet by the masterminds of Brexit, who gave very little thought to the real-life consequences for UK manufacturing. And oh boy, did they give absolutely no hoots to, to UK manufacturing. I've always said when the Leave campaign came out and they were introducing like their big heavy hitters, they wheeled out Patrick Minford, the Brexit economist, and he was going to be the one who was going to be like, answering all the economic questions, etc. And then they realized the stuff that Patrick Minford was saying, and they quickly wheeled him back in, because one of the things he was saying was that the UK manufacturing industry would be destroyed. And that apparently would be a good thing, because then we could import all these things really, really cheaply. But of course, what then does that do to our economy? What does that do to all those jobs that are here in the UK? Yeah, you can very quickly see why they quickly wheeled him back in, and then all they then tended to field after that was Daniel Hanan, just time and time again. So back to this. So the London-based company and exports to the EU have then halved since Britain left the EU, with the loss of the European market now a huge blow for a very small firm with revenues of at least 1.5 million and very limited growth prospects at home. Made UK and the manufacturers trade body said that the figures showed that the number of products being exported to the EU has now been reduced by 80%, with small and medium-sized businesses hit worst. Always was going to be the case, always what's going to happen. We always talked about this. Unfortunately, it came to pass. And like I say, you've got to think again what this means to people, to their opportunities, to the growth, to hiring, who they might have had to fire. Hard decisions, very, very hard decisions some of these people have had to make. And I don't envy them. I do not envy them at all. But Mr. Ormondson went, our exports have now halved, well, literally halved. We are now making efforts to try and get more exports in Europe, because British manufacturing was going down the toilet, which it has done now. With Keir Starmer now vowing to reset relations with the EU, Ormondson did implore the new Prime Minister to try and consider the small firms who do not have access to the Treasury or the Labour Party conference to make their voices heard. His message to Starmer was this: do not forget about the very large number of small British manufacturing companies who lead in design, ideas, and enthusiasm when it comes to bringing new products to the market. He said, Made UK are the big guys, the British aerospaces, the big manufacturers, the organizations like the CBI, Confederation of British Industry. We are irrelevant to them. If you multiply me by a million little companies doing all these things, it soon adds up to a very significant amount of British exports. It's consequences, isn't it? When you have politicians that have great ideas, they don't live with the consequences, so they don't care. By the time it all kicks in, they're either dead or in the House of Lords. That's very true. But yeah, no, I completely agree with him. There is only really the Federation of Small Businesses, and even then, they don't actually have a that big a voice at the table when it comes to some of these things, which I think very often is a shame. I do wish there was a much better organization to bring problems like this to the attention of government, etc. I often wish we had, we've got the business and international trade minister. I wish we had a businesses that was like a business minister that solely focused on SMEs. I think that would be very, very interesting to have. I don't know if it will happen, but honestly, I think it would be a very interesting thing to have. Government insiders also said that they are now determined to try and tear down as many barriers to trade caused by Brexit. But with Starmer now singling out rejoining the Single Market and Customs Union, the impact will be limited. A report published back in August by the House of Commons Library showed that UK goods exports to the EU had not recovered to pre-Brexit levels, and exports to the bloc exceeded 170 billion in 2017, 18, and 2019, but have not done so in any calendar years since. and were 135 billion in 2023. Government spokesman said we are trying to work to reset the relationship with our European friends and to try and tackle trade barriers. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, but unfortunately, you know, that guy is not alone. That guy is not alone at all. You can go to Sheffield. You can go to Sheffield, and there are a ton of like workshops, small business units out there in manufacturing like that that are really, really suffering. And that is a huge, huge hit to our economy because you can think about big manufacturers and they were always going to be all right. They can take the hit, they can take the cost, they can afford the expertise that these little companies can't. And I had a friend pre-Brexit where they used to send stuff to the EU, 10 minutes. 10 minutes to do it. It went from 10 minutes to 2 hours. And that was just paperwork. And that, for a business, soon adds up. May not seem like, doing paperwork costs money, but at the end of the day, it really does. And that all can very, very quickly, for a business, all add up very quickly. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.